You've heard the stories, right? A flight vanishes without a trace, maybe over the Bermuda Triangle. And that's it. Gone. But what if that wasn't the end of the story? What if the plane didn't just disappear? What if everyone on board survived only to be completely lost to the world? Today, we're diving into a really incredible thought experiment, a fictional story about what might be the ultimate tale of human survival. I want you to really think about this number. 9. Not 9 days, not 9 weeks, 9 years. For 9 long years, the world just moved on. Everyone on flight NC16002 was declared dead, a tragic mystery. But for them, stranded on some godforsaken island, their ordeal was only just getting started.
So the big question is, how? How could anyone, let alone a large group, possibly survive for that long on an island that's not even on the map? That's what we're going to break down. Now, remember, this is a thought experiment, a fictional scenario, but it's one that really gets to the heart of human resilience, what it means to build a community, and that raw, stubborn will to just keep going.
All right, let's set the scene. Our story begins on what seems like a totally normal night back in December 1948. We're on a Douglas DC-3, a classic plane, making a routine flight from Miami. The mood on board is probably pretty relaxed. People are settling in for the trip. Absolutely no one, and I mean no one, has any clue they're about to fly straight into a 9-year nightmare. So there they are, 134 people on board, cruising right over the infamous Bermuda Triangle. Everything's fine, and then it's not. 1 second, they're a blip on a radar screen. The next, just gone. Total silence. So what happened in those final moments? Well, it starts with a calm call from Captain Miller. A minor technical issue, nothing to worry about. But just 10 seconds after that call, they vanish from radar. Poof. A bizarre freak storm just appears out of nowhere and engulfs the plane, killing all the electronics. For the next 30 minutes, it's pure terror. They're being tossed around in the dark, helpless. And when they finally break out of the storm, silence. The engines are dead. They're a glider now, falling out of the sky towards an island they've never seen before. And this is where the first impossible thing happens. The plane should have exploded on impact, right? Instead, it slams into this absolutely massive, ancient tree. The branches act like a giant net, catching the plane, cushioning the crash. And somehow, miraculously, every single one of the 134 people on board survives. But here's the thing, surviving the crash, that was just miracle number 1. The real ordeal, that was about to begin. Okay, so the first few days, you can just imagine the scene. The initial shock, the relief of being alive, that probably faded pretty fast. It would be replaced by this dawning, terrifying new reality. We're alive, but where are we? We're hurt, we're lost, and we are completely, utterly alone. And the problems they faced were just immediate and massive. First off, 10 people were seriously injured and needed medical care they didn't have. Second, no fresh water, no river, no stream. The only water they had was what they could collect when it rained. The food they scavenged from the plane, that was going to run out fast. And all around them was this unknown, potentially dangerous jungle. The only thing keeping them going, really, was this desperate hope that a rescue plane would be spotting them any day now. But that hope, it took a major hit. The island taught them its first brutal lesson very quickly. Someone, desperate with hunger, tried eating an unknown fruit, and within hours, they were dead. That first death sent a shockwave of pure fear through the camp. It proved the island itself was dangerous, and it made their tiny stash of food from the plane suddenly seem a whole lot more precious and worth fighting over. So, the days dragged into weeks. And back in the real world, the search parties, well, they were eventually called off. The world moved on. The survivors of NC16002 were forgotten. And when that realization finally sank in, that no one was coming for them, they faced a choice. A really simple, stark choice. Lay down and die, or figure out how to build a new life right here. And you know what? They chose to live. They fought back against a chaos by creating order. Captain Miller stepped up, using his leadership skills to organize everyone. You had foraging teams, you had shelter teams, literally building homes out of the airplane's fuselage. A retired Army doctor, Evelyn Reed, set up a makeshift clinic. They stopped being passengers and started being pioneers. They were building a whole new society from scratch. But their biggest test? Hunting. The island was full of these big, aggressive wild boars. So they crafted weapons from sharpened pieces of the plane and planned their first hunt. It was absolutely terrifying. A couple of people got hurt. But when they dragged that first boar back to camp, wow, that was a huge turning point. It wasn't just about the food. It was a victory. It was proof they could actually fight back and win against this place. And then, after a year and a half of just scraping by, a new sound was heard in the camp. The cry of a baby. The first child was born on the island. And that was more than just a birth. It was a powerful symbol. It was hope made real. In all that darkness, this tiny new life gave them a reason to keep fighting for a future. But hope, it's a tricky thing. It can be incredibly strong, but it's also fragile. And as one year slowly crawled into the next and the next, the strain, both physical and mental, started to pull their little society apart at the seams. The island just never let up, and the cost of survival was getting higher and higher. So let's just take a step back and look at the numbers. Remember, they started with 134 people. 134 people who miraculously survived that crash. But the island was a much slower, more patient killer. Let's really look at the human cost here. It started early. Just 10 days after the crash, a group of 5 just couldn't take it anymore. They cobbled together a raft, pushed out into the ocean, convinced they could find their own way home. They were never seen or heard from again. Then, 2 years in, they tried again, but on a much bigger scale. This was a huge community effort. For months, they worked together, building a large boat from the plane's wreckage. It was their big hope. 25 of their strongest and bravest set sail. But a sudden storm appeared, flipping the boat. Only 9 of them made it back to shore. 16 people, gone. Just like that. And the years just kept taking their toll. People were lost to sickness, to accidents. Some probably just gave up. And so after all that time, from the 134 who started this journey, only 82 were left. And all that loss, it eventually broke them. After about 5 years, the community split right down the middle. It was a fundamental disagreement. On one side, you had Captain Miller and his followers, who refused to give up. Their motto was, escape or die trying. But another group had emerged, and they saw things very differently. They said, look, every time we try to escape, more of us die. This is our home now. We have to accept it if we want to survive. So by the 8th year, morale was at rock bottom. They were divided, they were exhausted, and then a massive cyclone hits the island and just flattens their camp. It really felt like the end, like the island was finally going to wipe them out for good. But then, something happened. A series of events so completely unbelievable, you could only call it a miracle. Okay, get ready for this, because it's an absolutely insane chain of events. First, you have the cyclone that destroys everything. A few weeks after that, a huge earthquake shakes the whole island. The quake is so violent, it actually shifts the old plane wreckage and uncovers radio parts that had been buried for almost 9 years. And right at that exact moment, a massive rare solar flare is hitting Earth's atmosphere, messing with the magnetic field. The plane's engineer, Arthur Weiss, just out of habit, messes with the broken radio, and a single tiny green light flickers to life. I mean, can you imagine that moment? With his hands probably shaking, Arthur grabs the microphone and speaks. Mayday, Mayday, this is flight NC16002. Is anyone there? We are alive. And just like that, 9 years of absolute silence were shattered by a voice from the grave. A rescue mission that was beyond impossible was suddenly, unbelievably, in motion. Someone actually heard him. A radio operator in Miami caught the faint call. At first, he couldn't believe it, thought it was a hoax. But it was real. A huge search was launched. And a few days later, one of the survivors, standing on the beach, sees a tiny dot on the horizon. As it gets closer, they realize it's a ship. A U.S. Navy ship. The second they knew for sure, it was just pure chaos. 9 years of pain, of waiting, of grief, it all just exploded. People were screaming, crying, running into the water, shouting at the top of their lungs, "We're saved!" You know, this story, even though it's fictional, is just this incredible look at human endurance. It really makes you think about the idea that Even when the entire world has forgotten you exist, even when you're lost in the deepest darkness imaginable, a single spark of hope can, against all odds, find a way to break through. And it really leaves you with one big question, doesn't it? What does it really take for the human spirit to survive?